Dr. Sue Berry earned her Ph.D. in biology from Princeton University, and she is a professor of biological sciences and neuroscience at Mount Holyoke College. Dr. Berry was dubbed Stereo Sue by neurologist Oliver Sacks, and then went on to write her own book, Fixing My Gaze, A Scientist's Journey into Seeing in 3 Dimensions. Her book describes the acquisition of stereopsis at age 48, despite having esotropia from infancy. Dr. Berry has some demonstration materials placed at your seats, so if some of you sitting in the back don't have any materials at your chairs, feel free to move forward. And then at the end of the presentation, if you would take those from your seats and deposit them in the boxes as you exit. Please help me welcome Dr. Sue Berry.
Good afternoon. Wow, this is a big stage. Less chance of falling off it. Okay. I'd like to start by taking us back to a time in my childhood. It's September 1962. John Kennedy is president. John Glenn has recently become the first American to orbit the Earth. And the Cuban Missile Crisis is just 1 month in our future. But I'm just 8 years old and only dimly aware of these global events. Mostly what I'm worried about is the start of the new school year. It's the start of 3rd grade, and school is stressful for me. It's stressful because I read slowly, and I'm always afraid of falling behind. But the school year starts out okay. I'm in a class with all my friends. Unfortunately, this situation did not last long, because shortly after the year began, the assistant principal of the school came into our classroom. She conferred briefly with my teacher, and then she stood in the front of the room and called my name. She asked me to stand up, and she said a mistake had been made in classroom assignments, and I belonged in Mrs. Danner's class. Then she asked a boy sitting near me to drag my desk behind me as she led me out of the classroom. I wanted to die. No one wanted to be in Mrs. Danner's class. Every single child in that class had a problem, had something wrong with them. Some had physical disabilities, like the boy I befriended who had polio. Other kids had trouble paying attention, and some were completely disruptive. Well, my mother, of course, went to talk with the school principal to ask about this change in class assignments. And the school principal explained to her that my score on standardized tests indicated that I was of low intelligence and was now placed in the right class. When my mother pointed out to him that my 2nd grade teacher, the teacher from the year before, had thought I was doing okay, he said to her, well, the teacher's human, and being human, she's biased. But the test scores are scientific and objective and reveal your daughter's true intelligence, or lack thereof. When my mother protested further, she said to him, and this is a direct quote, "You must face facts. Your daughter is a dim bulb." Well, my mother must have panicked, because she actually found a way to sneak into the school after hours and steal a copy of the standardized test that I had done so poorly on. Then she took me down to the basement of her house. She told me not to breathe a word to my brother or sister, and she gave me the test. My parents said that I did okay. Now, my mother knew that the most common adaptation, the most common response to a problem isn't compensation. No, it's avoidance. And what she was afraid of was that I would grow up avoiding reading. She knew she couldn't do anything about my classroom assignment, but she knew she could teach me to love books. So she read to me and with me constantly. And whenever I expressed an interest in a subject, a book about that subject would appear on my bed to surprise me when I got home from school. Her strategy worked, because by the time I finished elementary school and moved on to junior high, I was placed back in a normal classroom. I could read well. I was still a slow reader, but with good comprehension. I could lose myself in a novel. And I had learned that I could teach myself many new things by reading books. I also learned something else very important from this experience, and that is that my mother, normally so gentle and soft-spoken, would not only fight for me, but she'd break the rules for me. And she disputed the school authorities. She questioned the school authorities, not my intelligence. You see, my mom never thought I was a dim bulb. She never thought my problems in school had to do with my intelligence. She thought they had to do with my vision. My parents noticed that I was cross-eyed when I was just a little bitty baby. I would look with one eye and turn the other, alternating which eye I used for fixation and which eye I turned in. I had infantile alternating esotropia. By the time I had started third grade, I had had 3 eye muscle surgeries at ages 2, 3, and 7. And now my eyes looked more or less straight. I still saw like a cross-eyed person, however. I still looked with one eye and turned the other. But the eye turn was more subtle, so most people didn't notice. Since my eyes looked more or less straight, and since I could pass the school vision screening with 20/20 acuity with both eyes, the school authorities assumed that I had perfectly good vision for reading. But the school vision screening, which tests the ability of one eye at a time to discern details at 20 feet, doesn't test in the least the ability of a child to coordinate the 2 eyes together for reading at the near distance of about 16 inches. Moreover, I had no stereopsis, no ability to fuse the information from the 2 eyes into one and see in 3D. But why would stereopsis have anything to do with reading? After all, you can read with one eye, and the book itself presents a flat target. But the eye movements that we use for stereopsis are also the eye movements that we use for reading. Because in order to see with stereopsis, to fuse the information from the 2 eyes into one, you have to point the 2 eyes at the same place in space at the same time. So, for example, if you're looking close, if the target comes close, as you can see on the left-hand part of this slide, your 2 eyes turn in, so that the image of the target falls on the fovea of both eyes. And the straight lines in those pictures show you the line of sight of the 2 eyes. If the target then moves further away, you diverge the eyes. So again, the image of the target is cast on both foveas. These disparity divergence movements are usually learned within the first months of life. Okay, so now let's think about reading. When you read, only 4 or 5 letters on the line can be seen with optimal acuity. These are the letters seen by the fovea. So a good reader will aim both eyes at the same letter, or at most 1 letter's distance apart. And in that way, they can fuse the images of the letters from the 2 eyes for ready identification of words. then after a fixation period of about 1/4 of a second, the reader will make a conjugate saccade, moving both eyes about 7 to 9 letters further to the right on the line. And again, the eyes will land on the same letter or about no more than 1 letter distance apart. All right, but what about if you're cross-eyed? Your 2 eyes are not pointing to the same letter on the page at the same time. And by the way, this could also happen if you had other conditions of strabismus, such as strabismic amblyopia, or convergence insufficiency, or any other binocular disorder, which is going to disrupt the ability to make those disparate divergence movements and point the 2 eyes at the same place on the page at the same time. What are you going to see? And for this, I want you all to take out that piece of paper, which hopefully you have on your chair. You might be sitting on it. And I want you to do the following. Take the paper lengthwise, roll it up until it's about the diameter of a toilet paper roll, so that you can put it in front of your right eye and look through it as if you were doing I Spy. Now take a look at me so you can see what happens next. I want you to hold the paper in your right hand, the tube in your right hand. Take your left hand, we'll turn it palm to yourself. Put it up against the far end of the tube, the side of the far end of the tube. Don't put it over the hole, but put it over the far end, put it to the side of the far end of the tube. And then bring up the tube to your right eye and look through it. It helps if you look in the distance and open your left eye. What do you see? You see a hole in your hand. Does it look? Whoop! Go back one. Something like this? Is anyone in pain? I'll take that as a no. So let's think about what's happening here. The center of your right eye is seeing the hole. The center of your left eye is seeing the hand. And since your brain assumes that your 2 eyes are pointed to the same place in space, the hole and the hand must be in the same place. And therefore you see a hole in your hand. This is called visual confusion, which is a bit of a confusing term because here it has a technical meaning, as described with the hole in the hand experiment. I experienced a lot of visual confusion when I read. So, for example, if I was reading, let's say, The Velveteen Rabbit, and there were words on the left-hand side of the page and a picture on the right, my right eye would look at the words, and my left eye would look and think, wow, what's that interesting picture on the right-hand side of the page, and would look over at it, and before you know it, what I saw was something like this. I would see the pictures and the words overlapping. And when I got older, this would happen, for example, when I was reading a magazine. Of course, that meant that sometimes when I looked at a page just with words on it, the letters would overlap, or the letters would double, or they blink in and out, or they move about. And now you can also understand how it could be difficult for somebody with this kind of visual confusion to complete a standardized test when all the little answer circles are right in a row. Well, I eventually did learn to read and read well thanks to my mother. And the adaptation I used was the adaptation that many people with strabismus end up developing, usually unconsciously, and that is suppression. I would suppress the input from one eye, so I only had a single eye view of the page and the words. But suppression takes time and energy. And indeed, when studies were done of children with strabismus on their reading, it was found that the kids with strabismus fixated words for 35% longer than children with normal vision. And their saccades from word to word were inaccurate. And this was true despite the fact that the children in the study had 20/20 acuity with both eyes. And let's not forget as well that reading is an endurance activity. As you progress through the higher grades, the print gets smaller and the reading assignments get longer. Testing a child's ability to read one paragraph doesn't tell you how well they can sustain that ability to read. And anyone with a binocular vision problem may fatigue more easily when they are reading long assignments. Okay, now let's fast forward. We're going to fast forward 40 years. I'm now in my 40s, my late 40s. You can do the math. And my vision is becoming more troubling. When I look at the distance, things seem to jitter. Driving is difficult and it's frightening. So I consult an optometrist in my town named Dr. Stephen Markow. And he says to me, I think you would benefit from vision therapy. And I said, what's that? And he said, I'm going to refer you to Dr. Teresa Ruggiero, an optometrist in a nearby town. Well, Dr. Ruggiero prescribed for me a course of vision therapy which taught me, among other things, to do what most of you learn within the first months of life. How to make those disparity vergence movements, how to point the two eyes at the same place in space at the same time. Now, I used many vision therapy tools to do this, but the tool that I loved the most was the Brock string. And you all have a Brock string. Hopefully, you're all sitting on a seat with a Brock string. And so let's demonstrate how this device works. So take the string, put the bead, you have a single bead, put it about in the middle of the string or a comfortable viewing distance for you, and then put the string up to the bridge of your nose, an extended arm's length, and look at the bead. Hopefully, you all see one bead. And that's because your two eyes are aimed at the bead, and your brain is able to fuse that image of the bead into one. But the string images in front and behind the bead are falling outside Panem's fusional area, and therefore are seen as double. This is normal physiological diplopia, like you all know. So the image that you might see, that I hope you see, is the bead with the double string image, and the bead, it seems, appears to be in the center of an X. Did many of you get this? Okay. Well, the Brock string is a tool that is as elegant as it is simple, because what it is showing you is the line of sight of the two eyes. Those string images are giving you the line of sight of your two eyes with the image, the string image that starts on the right and moves to the left coming from your left eye, and vice versa. And notice that the two string images are meeting at the bead, just like the line of sight is meeting at the bead, or the lines of sight of the two eyes are meeting at the bead. Okay, well, when I first started working with the Brock string, I could only get the double string image and the bead in the middle of the X when the bead was about an inch from my face. And that's pretty common in somebody with esotropia, with crossed eyes. But with practice, I could move the bead further and further and further down the string and keep the X image. And I, of course, didn't stop working with a little mini Brock string like you have. I ended up working with much longer strings with more than one bead on the string. And what I want to tell you about is the day that I started to work with two beads on a Brock string. So I was in Dr. Ruggiero's office, and the vision therapist said, okay, I want you to converge on the first bead, look on the first bead, and I said, yeah, I got the X. Then she goes, now look at the further bead. And I go, yeah, I got the X. She goes, now look at the close bead. I said, got it. Now look at the further bead. And I said to her, I can feel my eyes moving. I can feel them turn in to look at the close bead, and then diverge a little to look at the further bead and get the X on the further bead, and then converge in again to look at the close bead. And she said, that's great. Now we'll move on to another activity. And I said, no. I just want to keep doing this. This sense of control over my eyes, this feeling was so empowering and thrilling. And that afternoon, after my vision therapy, I went out to my car, I sat down in the driver's seat and looked at the steering wheel, and it was floating in front of the dashboard with this palpable volume of space between the steering wheel and the dashboard. And I had never seen the steering wheel dashboard like that before. That was my first view with stereopsis. And that day happened to have been the day after my 48th birthday. I was more than 40 years beyond the presumed critical period for stereo vision when I first got my stereo view. Well, I worked very hard on my vision therapy, and over the next couple months, space simply inflated and expanded and unfolded. I could see palpable volumes of space between falling snowflakes. And when I looked at a tree, I could see that the canopy was round. I could see how the outer branches enclosed palpable volumes of space through which the inner branches penetrated. My gaze stabilized, and as for my reading, it got a lot more comfortable. I stopped missing little words like not in the middle of the sentence, which made a lot of what I was reading make more sense. I stopped rereading the same line over and over again. I didn't get visual confusion when I read The New Yorker with the magazine, you know, with text and words or little cartoons all on the same page. I could use my computer for longer periods of time. You know, my experiences in school would have been a lot easier and a lot less traumatic if the medical and educational authorities had recognized the importance of binocular vision skills in reading. And my experiences taught me that every child should have a thorough binocular vision exam before they start school. And if their binocular skills are found wanting, they should receive the treatment that they need. And there was something else very important that I gained from my vision therapy, and that was this. When I first went to see Dr. Ruggiero, and she performed the cover test and other tests on me, I felt just like the little girl in my eye surgeon's office. The little girl who had no control over her eyes and had to go to the hospital and have 3 operations just to look normal. But the day I fixated those 2 beads on the Brock string was the day that I began to take control of my own vision. I learned that I was not the victim of a visual fate that had been sealed in early childhood. With help and guidance from my developmental optometrist, I could fix a problem that had hounded me my whole life. I could fix my own vision. And if that's not a life-affirming and life-transforming experience, then I don't know what is. Thank you.